Good morning to everyone. I'm Mark Collins, Brand Partnerships Director at Electric House. And I just want to say thank you for everybody attending our webinar, How to Fail. So for those of you on the call who are not familiar with Electric House, we're a social media publishing group. We create, we publish, and we distribute video content. Electric House owns and operates the On the Tools and On a Budget communities and the groups within them. We also have our Ministry of channels, which include science, history, and the predominant focus there is aimed at educating a younger demographic, typically 16 to 24 years old. In 2019, On the Tools was consistently watched by more UK males than anyone else, which is something we're obviously extremely proud of. As you can see on the slide, there are some huge names in there, such as Sky Sports, Channel 4 and Lad Bible. It also goes to show that although the UK construction industry is made of approximately 3 million people, the content we create is far-reaching and goes way beyond the construction demographic. So on the panel today, we have Will Bonaddio from Electric House. We have Maria de la Peña, PR and communications consultant. We have Susie Santry from Sprout Social, and also Claire Gamble from Unhooked Communications. And we'll be putting some questions to those guys later on. So the webinar is due to last 1 hour, so we'll finish at 10:30 today. And just on the questions, if you do have any, please feel free to get these in throughout the presentation or when we go to our panel at towards the end. And you can do this by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. So moving into the webinar, so How to Fail, I'll introduce Will Bonaddio now. So he is an award-winning marketeer and international keynote speaker. He is the senior client partner in London for social media publishing group Electric House, having previously worked agent-side on brands such as Disney and Domino's Pizza, as well as in-house at McDonald's UK as their social media editor-in-chief. Will now supports brands of all sizes in creating, producing, distributing and amplifying video content through Electric House's dedicated social media communities, which deliver over 30 million views each and every week. Will, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Hello, everyone. Morning. Thank you for joining. So, yeah, basically what we're going to go through here is a bit of an overview just to make sure that everybody is on the same page, kind of a bit of a leveler before we then head into the main meat of this webinar, which is the panel. And so basically, this is a short presentation all about how you can turn basically negative press into a more positive outcome on social media. And really, this kind of, when looking at the research on how to do this, it comes down to 3 C's, and that is, can click that. For customer service, it's not always the most fun or sexy thing that we talk about in marketing, but it is really important when it comes to crisis management and turning around negativity on social media in particular. Next up, content. So how you can use your content to create positivity and positive reactions. And then crisis. So crisis management and how to deal with those. And we'll go into more detail about all 3 for the rest of this presentation. So obviously you'll be pleased to hear that there's no mention of coronavirus. I'm sure it will be coming up later on, but we made a point to not include it in the presentation because I feel like we've all seen a lot of coronavirus stuff recently, and it'll be quite nice just to focus on something else for a change. So the thing about this is a lot of brands will be aware of these 3 ways of doing it in terms of turning things around online in terms of negativity, but it's very rare that they really focus on all 3 and are really nailing all 3. Normally we see 1 or 2 being really focused on by brands, and there's always one kind of poor relation. So what I'd really recommend is it's important to consider all 3 and make sure that they're all working together, and we'll go into a bit more detail about how you can do that. So first and foremost, customer service, like I say, not always the most, not deemed the most exciting, but it can also have real positive impacts for your brand on social media. So your most unhappy customers are your greatest source of learning. Bill Gates said it, and it's something that we totally subscribe to and agree with as well. Some fun facts about social media and customer service. 67% of people go to a brand's social channel, not for marketing, but actually to receive help. It's probably not something that we like to admit in the marketing world, but yeah, there's a significant amount of people who are there to get help rather than hear about the next new product. 78% of people expect a response on their social media customer service query within an hour. And actually, it's really important because 67% of people switched after receiving poor customer service on social. But the good news is that 70% of people who get help on social return as a customer. And I've also seen some research that suggests that they actually spend up to 30% more once they've come back because they've had, you know, a good customer service experience. So it's definitely worth it because it's literally able to not only retain customers, but actually bring in more money as a result. And it's increasingly becoming the favorite way for people to speak to businesses. So this is some research that shows, you know, what's your preferred way if you do have like a customer query. When we go and look at the younger demographics, internet and web chat is tied with social media as their first choice. And even if you're speaking to an audience that isn't you know, in the younger demographic, the fact is these are your families of the future. These are going to be your customers eventually. But more and more with the younger audience, it's just their preferred way of doing it. So it's definitely something that you need to get on board with ASAP. The fact is, you know, a third of people would rather clean a toilet than speak to customer services. We still seem to make it really difficult for people to get help online and in other channels as well. I appreciate, you know, it can be an expensive endeavor for businesses to do, but like I say, it's 100% definitely worth it. And here's a few examples of brands that do a really good job of it. And yeah, it costs 5 times as much to attract a new customer than to keep a new one, than keep an existing one. So it's definitely worth doing. So some examples of brands that are doing this well. KLM is really held up as a fantastic example of great social media customer services. So as you can see on their header, they actually give you a, you know, expected wait time. We expect to reply within 22 minutes, and this is updated every 5 minutes. And their team looks after everything from brand and reputation to customer service, but also commerce as well. And so the story behind the KLM account is that they were receiving 45,000 mentions on Twitter every week, of which 5,000 were genuine queries that needed investigating. So it was good that they had a decent tool to kind of sort the wheat from the chaff, and be able to, you know, go to the comments that really needed help, and not need to focus so much on the ones where they were just being mentioned as part of someone's tweet. I love the fact that they were managing expectations with the header here. You know, keeping it, so this thing is, you know, it's 24-hour business. This is like, you know, are you going to make your flight or not? It's really important that you know if you're going to get a reply or not in the time that you need. And then commerce, they were one of the first to do this, where you could actually buy through social. So the story goes that they were seeing that they were getting a lot of mentions about, can I buy a flight, on Twitter. The person who spotted it spoke to the IT team. They said, yes, we can build that. It cost $3,500 to do. And then very quickly they were getting about 80,000 euros in revenue every week as a result. So that kind of keeping it in channel is really important. For customer service, absolutely. And we're seeing that more and more in terms of buying as well. Great Western Railway do a really good job of flexing their resource. So this is an example. So annoyed, I've just found out there is no trolley service on the 5-hour Brighton to Great Malvern journey, despite it being advertised as having one. They replied within literally 7 minutes, I think, when I was doing the screen grabs. So really sorry about this. If you could DM a picture of your tickets, I'll be happy to offer you an e-voucher. And what they do is they, like I say, they flex the resource. So if you're talking to them pre-rush hour, you can expect to get a response in 2 minutes. And if you're talking to them mid-rush hour, then they put more people on the team. And so then you can expect to hear a response within 3 minutes. So slightly longer, but obviously there's a hell of a lot more that they need to get through. So, you know, they flex their resource accordingly. It's really good that they've given the team full autonomy, so the person who replies is able to help. You know, it's that person who's given the e-voucher, rather than saying, you know, send a letter and then maybe a colleague will get back to you or something like that. And it's a really human tone of voice, which I really like. You know, they're not trying to be too corporate. There's no stock responses here, you know, sorry to hear that, please click this link. It really is based on, you know, what the person's saying, which is a really nice touch, and it's a theme that comes through throughout the rest of this presentation as well. On the point about getting the tone just right, Sainsbury's has done a really lovely job here. So somebody said, "Dear Sainsbury's, the chicken in my sandwich tastes like it was beaten to death by Hulk Hogan." Was it? And Sainsbury's response to that is, "Really sorry it wasn't up to scratch. We will replace Mr. Hogan with Ultimate Warrior on our production line immediately." So silly in tone, but you know, it's the right one to be able to be a bit silly about. You know, the guys obviously, the users having a bit of a laugh, and Sainsbury's is kind of getting in on the act. This is another example. So my daughter used to love your tinned mac and cheese until you changed the recipe. No more mac and cheese dancing in this house anymore. To which they reply, sorry Stacey, if you PM us your Nectar card number, we'll get this logged for our buyers' attention and pop on some points so you're not left out of pocket. I really love that kind of stuff where they say, you know, pop on, and you know, they have a bit of a laugh. For me, that's again the human tone of voice, which is so important. But if you'll notice on this one on the right, actually Sainsbury's isn't at mentioned. So the word Sainsbury's is in there, but the person did not at Sainsbury's. So they're clearly using social listening in order to find those comments and be able to respond to them. And this went viral in the right way as a result. And yet again, you know, they're keeping it in the same channel, so they're able to help. You know, they're not making you jump through hoops in order to get your query resolved. And like I say, really human tone of voice, which I love. You know, when I see things like pop on some points, when I was doing community management, I used to show that to my team and be like, this is exactly the kind of tone that we should be getting right every time, rather than, you know, with the greatest respect, we are very sorry to inform you that, unfortunately, you know, if you go that really corporate route, people switch off and it's just not as good. You wouldn't ignore a customer in real life. This is a person who just couldn't get hold of British Airways, and he took so much offence to it that he actually promoted his own tweet. So he tweeted, "Don't fly at British Airways, their customer service is horrendous." Promoted it so that 73,000 people saw it before British Airways even got back to him. And then when they did, they said, "Sorry for the delay in responding. Our Twitter feed is open 9 to 5 GMT. Please DM your baggage reference and we'll look into this." You know, it's not good enough. And he pointed it out. He said, "How does a billion-dollar corporation only have a 9 to 5 social media support for a business that operates 24/7? DM me yourselves." So this is obviously a massively extreme example, but you know, it's something that we definitely want clients to avoid. And I think he's got a point. You know, if they are operating 24/7, then the social team and the customer service team needs to be able to do a similar job. So what we really recommend is that customer service is at the foundation of your posting strategy. And various social media posting strategies look different, but generally speaking, you might have your big tentpole campaigns, then you might have your kind of always on, like, drumbeat reminders about the brand. Then you might have the opportunity to be reactive when positive opportunities arise. But fundamentally, underneath all of that, you have to have customer service as the foundation, because you can do the best post about your new product, but if all the comments are negative from a customer service perspective, it just tears the whole thing down. So it's really important that you always have customer service in mind when it comes to social media. And more we're seeing that brands are able to have a real, like, 360 view of the customer. So I would strongly recommend people listening to look into something like a customer service tool that lets you build up a picture of the same one person. That way you can avoid somebody, you know, calling you up, writing a letter and sending you a tweet, and you thinking that's 3 different people, and, you know, going back to them in 3 different ways, or potentially giving them 3 different bits of compensation. So with certain tools, you can actually start to build up that picture and go, right, John Smith in London, you know, we've spoken to him about that particular thing. I know that, you know, you in that department spoke to him already, and therefore I'm going to build on that, rather than starting from scratch saying, you know, this is the first we've heard of it on Twitter. Really sorry, can you tell me the whole story yet again? Which is obviously a really bad user experience, and it also takes up a lot more of your time as well. So next up, how you can approach this from a content perspective. So look, everybody wants to be liked. Brands and companies are no different. And KFC have done a really lovely example of this with their "Ain't No Small Fry" campaign from a while back. So basically, people were tweeting about their fries. So I've got to say, KFC are riding solely on their chicken because those are crap fries. Another tweet, somebody said, "How can KFC be so good at chicken and so bad at fries?" And then the one that you may have seen, "Dear KFC, no one likes your fries. Yours sincerely, the entire world." So KFC were going to be updating their fries anyway. Who knows how much this was really led by the people, but they basically used these tweets in a really clever and inventive way. And what they did was they actually promoted the tweets themselves. So these were promoted by KFC. And when these started to be promoted, LinkedIn and the industry went crazy because they were like, well, this is what happens when you put a grad in charge of social media and they promote the wrong tweets. What is going on? Why is KFC promoting this? So it created loads of conversation, but they really made a big thing of it. And in the end, they then brought it to the real world, and they showed these tweets. No one likes your fries, and then they underneath that said new fries coming soon. So it really got people talking. It really made people feel positively about KFC. Very cheeky, but it also made people feel like they were being listened to as well, which is always really important. CARLSBERG did something similar, and they took it even further. So yes, they took the tweets of people saying our generation have trust issues because we were all raised on those awesome adverts saying CARLSBERG is the best lager in the world. I need to finally taste it and realize it's not very nice. I'm not going to read exactly what that person says. It's highly inappropriate. CARLSBERG tastes like stale breadsticks. So they promoted that, but then what they also did was they got people in the CARLSBERG office to read out the meanest tweets and turn that into a video. That's a real trend that we see with like late night American TV shows, and that video did really well for them with nearly 5 million views. And then sure enough, they brought it into the real world and they said, look, we know that our beer isn't the best in the world, even though we said it was. So that's why we've changed it. And I absolutely love this campaign. When I saw this, you can bet I went down to my supermarket to try and get some beer from CARLSBERG because, yeah, I wanted to taste this new one. But by bringing to life the fact that we've listened to people and we know that it's not lived up to your expectations, which is why we've done something about it, that is so much more powerful from a customer perspective than simply, we've just updated the recipe. And this is it. When you listen and change your business, you turn haters into advocates. And that's exactly what happened to me. I'm not a CARLSBERG fan, but when I saw that they were listening to people and changing it accordingly, suddenly I wanted to get a can myself. Another really nice example, this is from Microsoft. So this is an out-of-home ad, but went viral on social. So this out-of-home advert was shown in Glasgow in quite a rough area, and basically said Cortana can remind. So for those of you who don't know, Cortana is like Siri or Alexa. Cortana can remind you to see if James is up for the cricket this weekend. So somebody took a photo of that and tweeted with it said nobody in the East End of Glasgow ever. That got loads of pickup from people who thought it was such a badly placed ad. But then a few days later, the ad updated and it said, Cortana, next time I speak with Chris, remind me not to mention the cricket. And then they took a photo of that and they tweeted out, we weren't kidding when we said Cortana was personal. So yeah, really nice example of being able to be reactive with your content and create some positivity out the back of it. Burger King have done something similar as well. So they released a video from their CEO saying, look, we know we've had a bit of a checkered past with our chicken. We know it's not the best thing to order on the menu. He even then said, why would anybody order anything else than the Whopper anyway? So obviously he's like bigging up the Whopper by saying that. But yeah, hands on cards on the table, chicken's not big enough. So what we're looking for is somebody to be a chicken taster, upload a video of you pretending to bite into a burger, and then you will get to feature on our ad. You will taste the burger for the first time out of anybody else, and we'll give you £20,000 for the pleasure. So he released that as like a viral social media video, and then they created this TV ad off the back of it, which had their chief taster, who they managed to get from social media. Not sure if sound worked for you there, but basically, yeah, they really bigged it up. They had like orchestral music leading up to him eating this burger, to which he's like, no, for a while, which I absolutely love. And then another example is the Transportation Security Administration, which I promise is not as boring as it sounds. So this is basically airport security in America. Not the most interesting thing, something that people really don't look forward to, but they've got a really good social media strategy. And we kind of touched on this in our last webinar, talking about how to, your brand isn't boring, but your social media might be. So what they've done is they focus on the really fun, interesting, wacky stuff that you see in airport security. So this is a knife which looks like a gun, really ticking both boxes there, and it's next to a taser. So this is something that was taken at airport security, quite rightly so. And then the status copy underneath says, one might say the traveller went off half-cocked when packing this knife in his carry-on bag. We know you're expecting us to say something punny about the stun gun. We're not going to. shocking, we know. So, you know, having a bit of a laugh, but obviously this is very serious stuff. They also post about the security dogs, because everybody absolutely loves pets on social media. And then also another wacky thing that had been found, somebody actually tried to bring a crab through airport security. So as they say, sometimes air travel can make you a little bit crabby. So this is like an account that you want to follow, but it's talking about airport security. And as part of that, you can see why airport security is so necessary, and it kind of makes you feel better about it. So it's a really nice example of turning what could be seen as quite negative or even boring, and turning into something really entertaining and loved online. So check out the TSA account. And finally, before we head into the panel, I'm just going to do a bit on crisis. And what do we mean by crisis? I mean, for me, you have issues and you have crises. And so an issue, like a negative comment can be an issue, and it's a bit like a candle. It might be harmless, but with the right environment, it can escalate into a fire. So an issue for me is something that lasts like 1 to 7 days. It's definitely something that needs fixing, but it's not going to like impact on the share price of your brand, or, you know, your overall brand reputation. But that's not to say that an issue couldn't then turn into something like that as well. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on for sure. And yeah, haters aren't your problem, ignoring them is, because, you know, that can then turn into more. We talk about like smoldering fires. What are those things in your business that you see often pop up as feedback, which is negative, where it's like, yeah, you know, we really do need to fix that, but for the time being, let's just go back to that person and, you know, apologize, maybe give them a bit of compensation, and hopefully it won't pop up too many more times. I would recommend, if you've got those sorts of things already that are happening, now is definitely the time to try and like fix that at the very source, rather than just reacting to people, because that is exactly the kind of thing that can turn into a crisis very quickly. What we've seen is that angry customers actually often won't speak directly to the brand. So this is a bit of research that I did for a client I used to work on, where basically in green is direct at mentions of them on Twitter. So this is saying at the brand. And basically, even with the biggest campaign of the year, when it comes to the total number of mentions, and the pink is the indirects and not mentioning them at directly, even the biggest campaign of the year, you're still only getting 40% of the mentions. So on average, about 97% of mentions of your brand are not going to be at you. So it's really important to be listening to what people are saying across social media, to understand what's being talked about and what could potentially turn into a crisis. Social media tools are essential to do this, and there's some really good ones out there. Something that anybody can do, and I'd recommend you do, is look at Google Alerts. So you can put in certain keywords or mentions of your brand, and if they're mentioned in a news environment or other, you can get an email to tell you, and then you can quickly have a look and see what was said. And then also Sprout Social, obviously we've got a representative from Sprout today. It's a social media tool which lets you do that kind of social listening we just talked about, and also lets you do community management much more efficiently than using the channels themselves. So things like that are really important. Keep an eye out on what people are saying, potentially pause all of your scheduled posts very quickly with a tool like Sprout, and take the according action. I'd really recommend that everybody thinks about a crisis plan. If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And what I mean by that is get multiple stakeholders in a room and really start to plan out, right, from 1 to 10, what are the different levels of crises that we could be dealing with? Who would be responsible for that, and what would our responses be? So yeah, like I say, rank from 1 to 10. In terms of how you would do that, probably an easy way to do it is look at what other businesses have done and how they've reacted, and also look at what would the reaction be if it was a case of, you know, closing all the shops, turning off all of our social media and having to fire somebody. Then that's probably going to be number 10, versus, you know, if we just say go back to the person and apologize, that's probably going to be number 1. So have a think about that, and, you know, get people from across the business involved to really help them give different perspectives. Definitely do it beforehand. I think everybody's come out of the last few months with a real idea of what, you know, the ultimate crisis can look like. So it will take a bit of time to set up first, but then once it's done, just revisit it every so often, and just keep it up to date, and it will be worth that upfront time. So yeah, obviously it's even better if you can prevent a crisis before it begins. This is something that United Airlines did, which I think we can all learn from. So if you're not familiar with this, basically a video went viral of a customer being forcibly removed from a flight after it was overbooked. And United Airlines, were criticised with the way that they dealt with it. And I think whilst I don't want us to laugh at anybody else's misfortune or a customer's misfortune, I definitely think there's lessons that we can all learn from this. So first and foremost, there was very slow pickup about this tweet that I've just shown you here. Originally, it was tweeted at 8 p.m. It really spiked in terms of coverage and retweets and conversation at 5 a.m. So classic time that a brand probably isn't checking their social media for customer service queries, and that really cost them. Next up, there was an increase in negative sentiment. So even before a huge increase in mentions, there are tools out there like Sprout, which basically will say to you, look, you're not getting any more tweets than you normally do, but you're getting more negative tweets than you normally do. This is something to be flagged. And so you can set that up that you get an email about that. And that is a really good way of going, okay, what's going on? Why are we suddenly getting so much negativity, even if we're not getting more tweets? And so if they'd had something like that in their armory, then potentially they would have been able to get on this earlier. Then their statement was very poorly received. So they didn't go back to people based on all the things that people were discussing in those conversations and in those tweets. It was a very generic statement, which was talking about, more about the overbooking of flights rather than the violence shown towards their customers. And then the CEO statement made things even worse. He talked about reaccommodating customers rather than just being honest about it. And this comes back to what I was talking about earlier about, being human, being real. That video is not showing somebody being reaccommodated. That is showing somebody being assaulted. And so, having that sort of honesty and being upfront about it really does pay dividends in this field. So KFC, again, is a great example of doing that. I'm sure you've seen this. This is the press ad that they put out in only 2 newspapers, but this was to apologise for the lack of chicken. There was basically a new delivery service that they used, which basically was unable to keep up with the demand, and therefore not only was chicken not available, but shops actually had to close. If you read the text, I'm not going to read it all now, I'm sure you've seen it, but it's very human, it's very humorous, and it's very honest as well. You look at the URL to find out more information. It's kfc.co.uk/crossed the road for details. So, they were very upfront about it. Look, we messed up, but here's what we're doing about it. And yeah, having that open, honest dialogue really does pay massive dividends. This was only printed in 2 newspapers, but it's been estimated that thanks to all the sharing on social as well, it reached 219 million people. And yeah, it's got that dedicated microsite. This has won multiple awards at the very highest level, including a Cannes Lion. This is best in class when it comes to press releases. Say, we've messed up. Here's what we're going to do about it. So if you haven't seen it before, definitely check it out. And actually, off the back of it, they even saw their brand impression score increase. So people actually ended up loving KFC more off the back of this whole crisis, which is an incredible result. A similar campaign is Nike with their Sacrifice Everything. So they worked with Colin Kaepernick, who was the original American footballer to take a knee during the national anthem in response and in protest to police brutality against young Black people in the US. So they worked with him, with very much the sentiment, believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything, which is totally in line with Nike's values as well. No doubt they were braced for a backlash. They knew that this was going to rub some people up the wrong way, but they were clearly prepared for it. And they know their audience, is the thing. They know that young, liberal men and women will be a lot more receptive to this, which is their target audience, than kind of older, conservative white males, which is not such a priority for them. So they took a gamble, but it was a very calculated one, and it really paid off for them. And like I say, it's totally aligned with their values. So the response that they saw, I mean, first and foremost, people were burning their shoes. The hashtag JUSTBURNIT and hashtag BOYCOTTNIKE was going viral. One thing to mention though is, even though this was going viral and it was tweeted a lot of these were people just making fun of the situation, that, you know, how can you be so offended that they're working with this athlete that you would actually burn your shoes? And the reality is you probably need to buy another pair of shoes anyway. And also you've already bought those Nikes, so Nike hasn't lost any money off the back of this regardless. Shares actually reached an all-time high off the back of this campaign, and they saw a 31% sales increase. And the research they showed is 19% of customers overall said they actually are more likely to buy Nike off the back of this. But even better, 29% of young males, which is really like a core demographic for them, said that they were more likely to buy Nike off the back of this as well. So it really paid back for them. So look, we're going to go into the panel next. Before we do, I always like to finish with a few questions rather than, you know, here's 3 bullet points for you, but 3 questions that for me to ask you guys in the audience. So first and foremost, are your customers getting the best customer service on your social channels? Secondly, what known negatives can you use to inspire your content, like we saw the likes of KFC and CARLSBERG do? And how prepared are you for a crisis? You know, what are those things that are bubbling away already? Or, you know, if something really massive happened, what would you do? Who would you talk to? And do you know what the best process would be? And if you don't, I'd really recommend that you start to think about that as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Will. Some great examples there of brands doing things well and also not so. So I hope everybody found that interesting. I'm going to move to the panel now, so run through some introductions. So we've got Maria de la Peña, who is a PR and communications consultant. Maria has worked with large and small brands, including McDonald's, Hostelworld, Cadbury and Smirnoff, and has a blended background of in-house and agency experience. Then we have Susie Santry, who's customer success manager at Sprout Social. Susie is our agency partner with a range of experience in social media marketing. Before joining Sprout, she worked with agencies across Dublin and as a social media specialist, content specialist, and a social media manager. It's a self-described social media nerd. Susie's worked with various brands and companies, from banks to beer brands and everything in between. And then we have Claire Gamble. Claire is the MD of Unhooked Communications, which specialises in PR and content for businesses in the construction, home and interiors, professional services, technology and healthcare sectors. Claire loves using creative, integrated PR strategies and tactics that are fueled by data and insights to help businesses get in front of their target audiences, get known for the right reasons, and create exciting new business opportunities. So thank you very much to all on the panel for joining us. So guys, just a reminder for getting in your questions. So please just click the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and I'll try and sort of work through those for the rest of the time that we've got on this call. So to get things kicked off though, I'll put a question out. So how do you handle a crisis where no matter what your response, a particular group will be upset? So if I perhaps go to Claire on that one.
Hello, hi. So the question, how do you respond? Is it when you can't please everyone?
Yeah, basically. So, you know, you've got a crisis on your hands, but, you know, no matter what response you give, you're guaranteed to upset a particular group of people.
Yeah, so I think this goes back to understanding your brand and your audience. So we'll go some really good examples there. So for example, with that Nike advert, they knew that that would provoke a positive experience with their target audience, however, a negative one with people who aren't their audience. And so that was, they understood their brand, they understood their audiences, they could go out with something. And I think there's a reason why big organisations as well, like the BBC, for example, will have all their employees say, views on my own, because they want to distance themselves a little bit with their employees, because they know that if somebody quite high profile or somebody who works for the BBC does or says something which might have a bit of a backlash, it gives them that distance there. So there's a few different ways to do it, but I think ultimately, excuse me, understand your brand and what you're about, like, and don't be confusing. So Nike and KFC, as Will talked through, had some really good examples, but there's loads of bad examples out there, like Lush, for example, the cosmetics store. They had a window display a couple of years ago, which was about police who were going undercover, getting relationships with the people that they were spying on. And it was just really confusing for like a cosmetic company to do something like that. And although their target audience is probably women, at the time there was a lot of like police cuts and everything. And people in general, the public, were supporting the police. So for them to do something like that was just really bizarre and a bit tone deaf, yet they didn't like respond to it in a very good way. So again, I think that just shows like understand your brand, and not just your brand, but what's going on in the wider world as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it does certainly. Thank you very much, Claire. And Maria, anything you would sort of add to that at all?
Yeah, actually. First of all, disclaimer, I'm a massive Nike fan. That is my shoe of choice. But just on that example, totally agree, excuse me, with Claire. They knew their audience. But just on the flip side as well, I do believe that they are the type of brand that sort of stood out there and went, do you know what? This is worth the risk and we'll accept that. And I think knowing your place and knowing your space and taking that chance is something you should make a stance in. And personally, for me, I would have actually expected Nike to have possibly been ahead of that game a little bit further, not just when Colin took the knee, because I think that's wonderful and that's great. And it's obviously 4 years later, you've had the NFL apologising, you know, a little bit too late, but still better late than never. But there is that other side where it's like they have been part of athletics, have got a strong stance in that. Their audience isn't just a white audience, and should they have been backing that a bit further in the day? Should they be contributing, etc.? So yeah, I hope that makes sense. But I think knowing your audience, but also just like making that decision to make your stance very clear, because, you know, it is all about risk, but you're a brand. You need to understand where your tone is and where you're going.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think yeah, common theme, isn't it? Know your brand and what you stand for, and know your target audience is absolutely key, isn't it?
I think something else we need to just to play devil's advocate and kind of not to go against everything I've just talked about and everything that which I totally agree everything that everyone said. I think it's important as well, because there are some people that you're just never going to please. And when I was doing my community management days, where, you know, when I was working for McDonald's and people were like, it's not real beef, and it's like, well, it is, and they're like, I don't believe you. And you're like, well, here's a video showing it, and it's like, no, you've made that up. And it's just like, well, nothing. I mean, literally, I used to say to the person, look, I've given you quite a bit of information here. Clearly, nothing I tell you is gonna change your mind. Fair enough, but please know that, you know, as a big brand, we're not allowed to lie to you. And so sometimes, you know, you've got to pick your battles. Is it something that you want to get caught up in? Like I say, it's really important to know what is a crisis versus what is an issue. And I think it's also really important to bear in mind, sometimes what seems massive to you in head office actually isn't necessarily massive across the public consciousness, for good and for bad. You know, we've had things in previous roles where we thought something, well, everybody's talking about this, we should mention it on Twitter. And then you mention it and people are like, what are you talking about? Because, you know, it's big for us, but it's not big for the majority of people. So I think that's really important to bear in mind as well, which is why tools like Sprout can kind of give you some context. And something to bear in mind too is, you know, at what point do you want to make a proactive statement? Because again, there might be a real significant minority of people who are aware of something, but if you are then publicly posting about it on your main page with millions of followers, suddenly everybody's going to know about it. And so is it at that level that you need to do that, or do you just need to speak to the people that it's really an issue for first?
Yeah,
lovely, thanks, Will. Just a reminder, sorry, to everybody on the call, Q&A button, just click that and get your questions in if you do have any. And next question for the panel, and obviously I appreciate you won't be able to necessarily give the absolute detail on it, but what is the biggest crisis that you've dealt with? And I'll perhaps start with you, Will.
I mean, I think everybody now can say COVID. So I used to, as an interview question, say tell me a time you've dealt with a crisis. And it was always good if somebody could say, this was it, this is how we dealt with it. So I'm not going to ask that question anymore because now everybody's got COVID on their CV. But without going into too much detail, it was a brand that I worked on many, many years ago who made it to a kind of investigatory TV show, and obviously didn't come out of it very well, and so it turned into a crisis. And literally we had protesters turning up at the head office. So when it's that level, you probably will get a bit of a heads up from the TV channel or from reporters who want to talk to you about it, which is good of them. And you could, that might only be a few hours, but it gives you something. In that situation, it was important to look at what posts were going out. And I would say this for any situation where you're in a crisis. Look at what posts are going out. Do you want to be posting at all? Do you want to be promoting any posts at all? And even when you are ready to post again in a day or two or a week later, just bear in mind the language that you're using, because a very innocent word that's in a tweet or a Facebook post or an Instagram post might have some relationship to the crisis that you were dealing with, and it can suddenly bring it all back up again. But yeah, we work very closely with the legal team, the comms team, really making sure that our customer service team and marketing team knew what was happening, and making sure that we were all really aligned on how we approached everything moving forwards, not just the social posts.
Claire, how about yourself?
Hi there. So at Unhook Communications, we work a lot within the construction sector and property. So a lot of the kind of day-to-day, well, hopefully not day-to-day, but the occasional crisis situations that occur are often around product recalls or planning permission, if there's like sort of disputes about new developments being built in places. So those are kind of the main ones that we tend to deal with. But just sort of going back to what Will said as well about the coronavirus, and not to dwell on it too much, but a lot of the time when we're doing crisis comms planning with clients, you kind of map out all the things that could happen. And often brands and businesses are like, well, we're great, nothing will happen to us. But then something massive happens in the world that impacts you out of the blue, like, and you can and should prepare for something like that. And at the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, we saw so many bad examples of comms going out. Everybody had a knee-jerk reaction. Everybody was terrified, especially like businesses, because everyone thought, what is happening? Everyone wanted to remain current and in front of their audiences and their customers. So everyone was just churning out stuff, and there wasn't a lot of thought. There was a lot of panic. So we carried out our own market research around it to find out how consumers were responding to it. And there were loads of people who were reporting back to say that they'd boycott brands because of the way that they dealt with things. You know, you had people, big businesses, announcing redundancies on social media and in the media before they'd actually told their employees. You even had like nice brands like Waterstones getting criticised because at the beginning of the pandemic, they said they were going to keep their stores opening, and people love books and people love Waterstones, but people were saying don't shop there. And Wetherspoons are quite a sort of Marmite brand anyway, but they had like a big boycott as well on social media. And even like somebody developed an app so that people could find a pub which wasn't Wetherspoons to go to. And so with those sort of situations, like we were advising clients a lot to say, what are you doing? Like, just take a minute, just pause, think. You don't need to just have a knee-jerk reaction and send out too many comms. There's a lot of noise going on, and you're adding to the uncertainty, you're adding to the worry, and sort of the worst case as well, you're going to put people off your brand. And interestingly, it was younger, the kind of more millennial market, which were more inclined to boycott brands because of how they dealt with the coronavirus and their comms associated with it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing. So probably the only thing worse than not doing anything at all is going out there too soon and really telling the wrong message, isn't it? Yeah,
definitely.
Just Susie, from a Sprout perspective, obviously I'm not expecting you at all to comment on any brands in particular, but what did that do? You know, I can imagine Sprout was a pretty busy place when, you know, in general, when this all sort of kicked off from the coronavirus.
Yeah, for sure. And because I don't kind of work on like the social media side of things within Sprout, I can't comment too much, but I can say even ourselves, we pivoted our own strategy. We paused our content and we decided to look at what we were putting out. And from there, we decided to, you know, put out the resources that we knew our customers would really value at that time. So certain, you know, tips and tricks, certain things about leading with empathy. And I think that's really important. And even when you look at what happened with COVID, it's an interesting one of, it might not have been something that specifically would affect, say, your brand or your business, but it was something that really just needed to maybe be addressed overall. And within Sprout, there's certain tools we have that really do work so well for like crisis comms. For example, a pause all button, something as simple as that, where you're not having to go into each native network and pull your scheduled posts, because they might just need a little bit of tweaking, or it might not be the right time, or even something as if you are the type of person who gets to schedule months in advance. You know, I was never lucky enough to have that kind of foresight, but if you do, you could have had an event going on in 2 months' time that of course has suddenly, you know, fallen by the wayside. And it was so important to just pull that content back. And then of course, give yourself the time as well and the breathing space to sit down with your team, collect your thoughts and say, right, what do we need to do now with these posts, with this time? And how are we going to like pivot our strategy in our own tone of voice and in line with our brand and work from there?
Fantastic. And it'd be remiss of me not to go to everyone on the panel for this question. So Maria, finally.
Excuse me, sorry. Hold on one sec. I think what's key, definitely important, is scenario planning when it comes to this. Will agree with me on this. Quite often when I've worked in line with social, because that's obviously the case when it comes to communications, I've always been trained to think of the worst possible thing that can happen. And when it came to signing off a lot of brand assets with a particular brand that we worked together on, it could sometimes come across as if I was muting all the fun and being that buzz killer, but it was just more about maybe I was, sorry Will, but it was more about thinking of the most explosive thing that can happen. And that for me has generally worked when handling with crisis comms, and most PRs would have done that. They just think of the most craziest thing that could possibly have happened. A lot of research. Media relations plays a huge part in it as well for classic PR, because you have that dialogue. That is where you will then get hopefully the heads up into a particular story, or at least knowing whispers on what the agenda is, because, you know, it's easy to look at the news agenda and see what's going on and where it's flowing to, but there's nothing nicer than having strong media relations to be able to you know, be given the opportunity to know what's coming first and foremost, and secondly, as a bonus, be able to have your say. So I think scenario planning is just, you can never do enough of it. Obviously with things like the big C word, Corona, you know, that kind of like hit everyone left, right and center. And I think we've all spoken about brand and customers and consumer element of it, but definitely for me as well, a huge part that played, which made it obviously a high risk, was that all elements of communications engagement was red alert. You were thinking about how your employees were taking all of this as well, yourself included. You're thinking about how the C-suite were going to react to this. Should they say something? Is it their place yet? You know, and obviously a whole part of them fact checking to make sure that you weren't just jumping on a bandwagon, because this story was just erupting. You know, it was all brand new for us. So in short, scenario planning.
Well, yeah, I think that's a good point as well, Maria, about knowing the context. And if we step away from coronavirus, one of the things I wanted to mention was, like, you often see, like, check out this CCTV footage of what the security guy did to this, you know, poor customer. And it's literally a 5-second clip of a security guard pushing somebody out the door of a shop. Or it can be a story that someone's told, you know, in a 280 character tweet. And it's often really important, before jumping and going, right, you know, we're going to fire the person, or they've been fired already, or whatever that is, really taking a look at the full context, because sometimes that 5-second clip, you didn't see that the bit before, you know, the person was assaulting the security guard and he's, you know, pushing them out the door to defend himself or something like that. So I think that's always really important, just to kind of make sure you know do the necessary investigations before somebody reacts.
Yeah, and the story can have a backstory as well, from, you know, it could be someone just trying to create content, you know, or it could be a genuine situation happening, which which has obviously come up for us as well, I remember. But,
Thank you, guys. No, some great advice there. Thanks very much, Maria. And got a question in from one of our participants, guys, Sarah Smith. So I work in the construction industry, and luckily we don't get many negative comments online. If we receive a negative comment about a product, though, or its performance, what do you think is the best approach to managing that negativity? Should we offer to send someone out to visit them on site? Should we send a free product for them to try again? She would really appreciate your thoughts. So I'll perhaps start with Will on that one.
I was going to say, let's talk to Claire. It depends. I guess it depends on what the product is. You know, if we're talking a paintbrush versus a bulldozer, obviously it's going to be very different. But I think, one of the things is keep a record of what that feedback is, because if it's the same thing coming up, and like I say, it's much better to be like, right, how can we fix this at the source, rather than constantly having to send some compensation or send somebody down to the sites to make sure that it doesn't happen for that person anymore. Like, how can we stop it happening at all? So that would definitely be something that I would always bear in mind. If there's a problem that's coming up all the time, just how can we fix it? I guess it depends on, I'll be honest, it's working as a construction customer service person is not my area of expertise, but what I would say is look at what your peers are doing and what kind of is seen as the accepted response to that, and talk to people internally and what are you comfortable doing. You know, just because somebody's come to you on social media, what if they came to you with a phone call? What would you do in that situation as well? Obviously social has some potential big rewards, because if you do a good job, the more people will see it than, you know, a one-to-one phone call or a letter. But yeah, it comes down to what are you able to do, what are you willing to do, and what do you want to be known for, really.
No, absolutely. And I think, you know, I've actually dealt with a client sort of fairly recently that has had a sort of similar issue. And I think it's, and I know the guys touched on this earlier, but it's really understanding what is the problem. You know, is it just a faulty product? In which case, you know, sort of, sending out a replacement for that, you know, potentially sending a replacement and offering a refund, for example, could work really, really well. But if there's a flaw in the design or the product itself, you're potentially only just inflaming the situation to simply replace it. You know, and again, that goes back to the scenario planning there. You know, if you replace a product that is, you know, that there's an underlying issue with it, you know, are you just sort of, you know, potentially stoking the fire there? So, yeah. Claire, will assured me you'll be well placed to answer this. So,
yeah, so it's interesting with the construction industry. So if it's hopefully just like a one-off, the product wasn't what they expected, and if you don't get that many negative comments, then it's perhaps a good opportunity to spend a bit more time on finding out what that problem was and helping to resolve it somehow. But if it's maybe the first sign that a product isn't performing how it should do, it could be the first sort of indication of a bigger issue. Now, this happens time and time again. Like, so a few years ago within the industry, all paint brands were having a problem with white paint, and like certain formula of white paint was going yellow. It was an industry-wide issue, and there was a lot of conversations going on about it. All the big paint brands were in focus within this, because it's like, who's going to solve this problem first? So the fact that people were being able to like test and find solutions, that in itself became like the news stories and the narrative around this industry-wide problem. So the paint brands who were able to say, we fixed it, we've got a new solution, this white paint isn't going to turn yellow, and it's not got this smell, and it performs the best, that was then a positive PR story. And I think sometimes it can help if there's a particular problem or issue which is industry-wide, not just your own brand or business, but it's how you deal with it and showing people that, and your customers, that you're trying to improve things to make things better. So I think that was sort of quite a good example where you can make improvements and turn and create like positive PR stories off the back of it as well.
Thank you, Claire. Hopefully, Sarah, that answers your question. But you know, please feel free to follow up. I am conscious of time though, so I'll look to sort of squeeze at least another question in. So, one of the questions we've got pre-prepared, which I think people will certainly have an interest in, is where is the line between trolling and a genuine crisis? I'll start with Maria on that one, please. Hopefully it's not my computer that's frozen. I'll perhaps go to you then, Will. It looks like we may have lost Maria for the time being, at least.
Yeah, that's cool. So yeah, I guess it comes back to what I was saying, like, you know, with that customer who, no matter what I told them, they were just like, no, you guys suck. You know, it's not real beef. You know, you're lying to me. And we would literally get when I was working at McDonald's, we'd have someone saying, you know, this is why McDonald's is failing. And it's like, we literally announced 50 consecutive quarters of growth yesterday. So, you know, it's based on just nothing. It's just based on somebody who you're not going to be able to convince. Otherwise, they're just a rejecter. You know, you go back to them and you tell them something, they're just not having it. Like, they can't be convinced otherwise. And a lot of their claims are baseless, or it's not constructive feedback. For me, a genuine crisis is, like I said, something that is going to be like affecting the share price, is going to mean you're going to need to turn off your marketing activity. You might need to close the stores. It's reputation of staff, or a senior member of staff, and the way they've been conducting the business or their personal life. That for me is like a proper crisis. And those are the kinds of things. I mean, they're all worth going back to people on. You know, even that person, if there's a troll who has gone viral with a claim, then it's very easy for you to prove it is not the case. Even if that person is rejecting it, the fact is that reply that you've made is still tacked onto that viral post, and there's going to be a hell of a lot of people who do see it and do understand where you're coming from. But a crisis, sometimes, you know, it's going to be, often it's going to be more than just a reply. You need that as well, but that's when you really need to start taking action, like across the wider business, and really potentially even changing the way the business is running, if not for that 24 hours, but maybe for all time moving forwards.
Yeah.
Thank you, Will. Sorry, Claire.
Often, so trolls are just the worst, aren't they? But sometimes you can just, your stomach sinks when you see that kind of tweet and you think, oh no. But actually, have a look at their profile. Have they got like 0 followers? And is their like whole Twitter feed just, you know, abusing brands? So in those sort of situations, don't respond, because if you're a brand or a business, chances are hopefully you've got a decent following. So if then you respond, you're just drawing attention to it. So that's always the first thing to look at, really, and just try not to worry too much. And I think often, I mean, we work with a brand at the moment, and a lot of their paid social ads get a lot of people like joking about what the business is claiming, but actually we can respond and we can prove that they're wrong and have a bit of a joke back with them as well. So, and I think as the general public are sensible, smart people, they can see when people are being just intentionally abusive or being trolls. So kind of give the public the benefit of the doubt and try not to worry too much and respond accordingly. Like, don't make the problem worse or draw attention to something which isn't a problem in the first place.
No, absolutely. I think about some of my experiences as well. I think actually just you don't necessarily always have to respond with trolls in particular. You know, I've seen lots of instances where you do get that troll, and actually the audience themselves defending the brand, which is, you know, it's obviously from a brand perspective, it's great to see, isn't it? So I completely agree. I think you know, just there are times when you need to be patient and let things play out, isn't it? Particularly with trolls. And Maria, I don't know if you're there.
Yes, I am. Sorry about that earlier.
That's okay.
Completely agree with everything that was said there. Just the only other thing I was going to add is it's good to know your frenemies as well. I've worked with a beer brand, and we had to do an audit. This is the very early days of social media coming out. you know, new exciting shiny toy, and they were absolutely stunned to know that the nickname they were given, and it was a real eye-opener for them. And I think that was a massive lesson learned for them, to know that actually there are haters out there, and you know, it's okay, and you know, you can actually use this data to turn it around. So you know, it's one thing being good friends with media relations people and journalists, etc., but also know the people who are just, you know, not favourable of your brand. You might not be able to turn them around, but you should have a very good response and statement reactive to scenarios that will possibly happen that will involve them.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Maria. And thanks to everybody on the panel today. We had lots more questions to go through, but obviously we only have an hour, and I appreciate how busy everybody's diaries are. So thanks again to all our participants for joining us on the webinar. I hope you guys found it really, really useful and interesting. If there are any other questions that you'd like to take offline, please do get in touch with us. And additionally, if there's anything else you'd like to discuss at all, or if we, Electric House, or anybody else from the panel can help in any way, please also get in touch. My email address, the inquiries Electric House email address is on the current slide. We can support or certainly point you in the right direction. If you've not managed to catch all of this webinar, we will be putting a recorded version on the Electric House website, which you can find at electrichouse.co.uk. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great day, and hope to hear from you soon.